somewhere on the frozen banks of the Danube, in a leather tent lit by a single oil lamp, the most powerful man alive confessed something he never meant anyone to read. He wrote that he was tired. Tired of the crown, tired of the war, tired of pretending he'd ever wanted any of it. His name was Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, and the private notebook he kept was never meant to become a book at all. He called it simply To Myself. We call it Meditations. Buried inside, it sits a confession that survived nearly 2,000 years by accident. From the outside, Marcus had everything a man could want. Absolute power, an empire from Britain to Syria, armies, gold, endless worship. But turn the pages of his private diary, and you find a man quietly begging himself to endure one more day on the throne. So how did the philosopher-king Rome remembers, as its wisest ruler, end up secretly dreaming of walking away from everything? To understand that, you have to go back to a boy who never once asked to become emperor. Marcus was 17 when the dying, childless Emperor Hadrian picked him out almost like a chess piece for Rome's future. Hadrian adopted a man named Antoninus Pius on one condition, that Antoninus adopt young Marcus and raise him as the next emperor. Marcus didn't choose the throne. The throne was arranged around him decades before he ever sat in it, like a trap closing slowly. Ancient writers say the boy wasn't thrilled by the news. He was troubled, some accounts claim, even upset at leaving his old life behind. He'd fallen for philosophy as a teenager, wearing the rough cloak of a Stoic student and sleeping on the floor to toughen himself. He wanted books, quiet rooms, long arguments about virtue. Instead, fate was preparing him for battlefields, budgets, and endless petitions. For 23 years, he trained as Antoninus's shadow, learning the machinery of empire while his heart stayed with his philosophy teachers. Then in the year 161, Antoninus died, and Marcus Aurelius, a philosopher at heart, became sole ruler of the known Western world. Almost immediately, the empire seemed to punish him for it. Parthian armies invaded the east. Flood struck Rome. Famine followed close behind. Then came something worse, a plague carried home by returning legions, one that would kill millions across the empire over 2 decades. As if testing him personally, Germanic tribes surged across the Danube, dragging Marcus into a war he never wanted to fight. He would spend most of the rest of his life not in Roman palaces, but in muddy frontier camps, commanding soldiers instead of reading Plato. It's in those cold camps between battles that Marcus began writing a private notebook, 12 short books in Greek, meant for his eyes only. He never gave it a title. He never showed it to his advisors. He certainly never intended it for the public, let alone for us. And that's exactly why it feels so raw. There's no audience to impress here, no image to protect, no propaganda to maintain. In one passage, he reminds himself, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to throw away. Death stands at your elbow." That's not the voice of a man savoring his power. That's a man reminding himself, quietly, why he keeps showing up at all. In another passage, he catches himself dreaming of escape. People run off to the country, the shore, the mountains, wishing they could leave it all behind. Then he corrects himself. The real retreat, he decides, isn't a villa or a beach. It's learning to withdraw into your own quiet mind. Historians have long noticed something strange. Nowhere in his own diary does Marcus celebrate being emperor. Not one passage of pride survives. Compare that to almost any other Roman ruler. Men like Nero or Domitian, who craved the throne, killed for it, and flaunted it constantly. Marcus, by contrast, sounds like a man serving a long, exhausting sentence, reminding himself every single morning why he can't simply walk away. One of his most famous lines reads like an alarm clock speech. When you wake up, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant. Read is Stoic bracing, it's wisdom. Read plainly. It's also a man dreading the day before he's even opened his eyes. Ancient biographers writing after his death claimed Marcus once confided to friends that he envied philosophers who never carried an empire on their shoulders. The same accounts say he found the burdens of rule almost unbearable at times, and that duty alone, never desire, kept him at his post. There's no record of Marcus ever plotting to abdicate, no secret letter announcing resignation. He never once tried to walk away in public. But the diary tells a quieter story than any dramatic exit could. A man wanting to quit every single day and refusing to. Why refuse? Because his teacher, the philosopher Epictetus, had drilled one idea into generations of Stoics. Focus only on what's in your control. Marcus couldn't control the plague, or the tribes crossing the Danube, or senators whispering behind his back. But he could control his own post. And to a Stoic, abandoning your post simply because it's hard isn't freedom at all. It's exactly the weakness his whole philosophy was built to defeat. So instead of quitting, Marcus wrote himself back into the job, page after page, camp after camp, exhausting year after exhausting year. He kept doing this until the very end. In the year 180, sick and worn down at 58, he was still living in a military camp. He died not in a marble palace in Rome, but in a frontier fort near modern Vienna, still commanding troops in the middle of a campaign. Even then, ancient writers say his final thoughts weren't of relief. They were about his son and about the empire he was leaving behind. Think about that. A man privately wished for nearly 20 years that he could put this burden down, and he never once put it down. The diary he wrote for no one became, centuries later, one of the most read philosophy books on earth, translated into nearly every language. Readers today quote it for confidence, for calm, for motivation. Few realize the man writing it was often talking himself out of quitting his own life. Maybe that's the part nobody tells you about Stoicism. It was never about not wanting to quit. It was about doing the job anyway. Marcus Aurelius never got the quiet villa, the garden, the peaceful philosopher's life he privately craved on those cold Danube nights. What he got instead was harder, and in a strange way more honest, showing up exhausted, unwilling, and afraid, and doing the work regardless. So the next time your own morning feels unbearable, remember the notebook nobody was ever supposed to read, and the emperor who wrote it anyway.